Okay, so let's do some animations for this character. I brought the arms down and started doing this idle animation. And when I do my animations, you can see I can turn off this edit mesh here too. You can see in the modifier list that I can add these extra layers here. And if we wanted right now too, we could use the shader to smoothen out the polygons in the game for close-ups if we use the HLSL files. But I don't even think that would be necessary. And as far as adding real-time dynamics goes to it, I don't even know if that's necessary either. We can actually just animate the springiness of the hair as the character moves around and stuff. Same with the tail, although it would be kind of nice to have a little bit of bounce of the tail kind of flowing around with the direction of the character, so I don't know, we might look at something like that. All I did for this animation, I'm not going to go into too much detail with this. The walk and run parts, though, I'm going to go into a full tutorial, but for the idle, you can kind of do whatever you want. So I kind of use this chest bone and the belly bone to kind of animate the chest kind of moving up and down as though the character just finished running and it's kind of breathing hard. We'll tame that down a bit too if you want. I like to exaggerate my animations, but you probably would prefer to have something a little more subtle. So when the head turns, I kind of have the eyes go to the direction the head's turning to, and have the eyes blink as the head turns quickly. As the eyes come open, the pupils dilate a bit bigger as they adjust to the light. Right near when they close, I kind of have them go a tiny bit smaller. The ears I have kind of twitch every once in a while, and all I kind of did for the ears, so I go into bone select only, double click, and you can see I got some close range changes in the ears here. If we go to this select and rotate, because we have these all selected, oh, that's not going to work right now. Make sure you change use selection center to this one here, use pivot point center. And then you can move the ears around the way you want to. Just make sure auto key's turned on when you do that so that you can store that keyframe. Otherwise you'd actually need to manually set the key with this. Also played around with, go to all here so I can select the head, because I still have my morpher controls in the head. So I did animate some of these morph targets along the way. This is mostly for cinema purposes. In the game, I'm mostly just going to use bone controls. I might use morph targets for dialogue, depending on whether I think I need them or not. I think at first, though, we're just going to focus on making sure all the bone controls and skin meshes are following the way we want them to. So like with the bone controls, I could still make the character talk even without the morph targets. Unless I used a bunch of different bones in the face to move parts of the face around. I don't have a bunch of different convincing facial expressions unless I use the morph targets. You could even program it to switch to different morph targets on script in your game so that the facial expressions kind of match the dialogue of the character at that point in time. And that way you don't have to create a whole ton of animations. You could just have the character idling, even set up your own keys for the rotations to match up with the speech, or you could do it in here. You could even use a generic speech where you just have the mouth kind of doing this, kind of randomly changing. Just depends on how much time you have to work on it and how ambitious you are, I guess. But we can also copy in the morph targets and pursue that too if we like. Once you got everything set up, that's the key. Once you got everything to the point where everything's set up and you can easily create those morph targets and expressions and animations even right in your own game engine, and therefore you're saving a lot of data loading because you're not loading up entire skeleton animations and reloading morph targets or anything like that. You don't want to do anything redundant because that's going to waste load time and processing time. So what I do here is I have the character changing focus of interest on what's going on in the environment, looking around for potential threats or potential items of interest. And you'll notice here I got the hair kind of flowing off to the side, and I'm actually using the bone animations for that. So I'm using this head controller here to control the hair to kind of flow in the opposite direction of the direction the head's moving, because it's going to kind of stay behind a little bit until it catches up. So it kind of gets, you kind of have some compression in the opposite direction. In my test animation, I didn't have, I'm noticing too, I gotta kind of fix up some of this vertex weights for the, okay, so let's grab the eye control here. And probably the bottom lid is up a bit too much. Let's bring it down. Except before we do that, hit Control Z. Let's make sure we have auto key turned on. Don't ever forget that. that will really mess you up. And save frequently when you're doing animations. So we'll go on 22.6. Okay, and then another thing you can do, once you kind of have your animations sort of set up, you can go to this curve editor for your animations, and you can adjust the ease in and ease out of all this stuff, but I'm going to go to shapes only. That's for like moving the head around and all that. So like I could just pick just this head controller, for example, and I could drag around all of this. And we could go tangents auto, go in here and adjust, grab the offset, and what time that frame is at, if I wanted. And I think there's a way to make it so that it cycles the easing. You know what's neat too is if, say at a certain key you wanted to kind of smoothen out the animation a little more, or make it deviate in some sort of specific way, you can actually draw in or insert keys right into these changes along the key graph. And so if I wanted to work on the, say the y-axis rotation of this one, I could move this up and down, change the rotation amount of that keyframe. If we wanted, we could alter this tangent here to make it a little bit of a smoother easing these out. But yeah, all I did for this animation, select all the shapes, open up the curve editor, track view curve editor, and just selected all these, and then went to tangents auto, and then just went in and kind of manually adjusted whatever I needed along the way, which wasn't really much of anything. So then if I wanted to export this as cinema, I'd go into render setup, and pick a resolution or create a custom resolution that's a higher resolution. And then click on files. Make sure you set the type to AVI, and make sure to set your animation range and whether or not you're going to skip any frames. We don't want to skip frames. Using the Alt 200. When we export that, we're only going to export the results with the baked bone positions and orientations, and it'll export those into an FBX with all the different frames for the position and orientation of bones. And then if you're using the skin mesh in Monogame, for example, it'll make sure to use the weight of the vertices in association with the bones that are influencing it by that weight amount to move everything around just like it is in here. Now the thing is, normally you could go like say every 10 frames or something, have the bone orientations and rotations, and then just interpolate in between, or interpolate from keyframe to keyframe. Having the exact orientations and positions of the bones in each frame though, however, does actually reduce the number of calculations you're doing per frame. And then the GPU is going to handle setting the vertex positions based on those weights and positions and orientations. So it'll be a transform matrix for each bone passed along and used to update the skin. Reduce these ones, 22.8 or 0.6, whichever. And I still have auto key selected, so now also kind of did this with the tail. Or kind of have a wagon back and forth, and I'm thinking that I should actually have these other bones curl a little more. But if I ended up adding some flex, some programmed flex to that, it wouldn't really matter. Stuff will kind of flow around the way it should. So I don't know, we'll see later. Maybe we'll do that, maybe not. Probably not necessary. Kind of have the eyebrows change a bit too during the animation. The mouth moves ever so slightly. Keep in mind when the character's head is facing more downward and is looking kind of straight ahead or up, the upper eyelid should come down a bit. Conversely, if the character's looking up, or if the character's looking, like actually looking down, head's pointing down, the eyes are pointing down. For example, if I had the character looking like this, then I would actually take the top lids and kind of have them close part way. And if the character wanted to look up and the head is kind of facing more forward, the character's trying to look up, then you might even want to raise those upper lids a bit and raise the bottom ones a bit. So now if we want to see what it's going to look like, this is approximately what it'll look like in the game too. With the AVI set up and your file range set up, we can click on render. And when it's done, we can hit this little disk symbol, just navigate to the render output, right click and click play and take a quick look at the results.